Hi, this is Magyar from FromWithin Coaching. I'm here today to unpack, along with Coach Augusta Goodcrawl, the Clifton strength of harmony. So, as always, Augusta, you're a trooper. We sit, we discuss all these different strengths, some that we have, some we've had some guests on. Today is just me and you talking a little bit about harmony. And I know that for both of us, we both have had clients that have had harmony before, but this will be fun to kind of see what the nuances are with this strength. So as always, welcome to harmony.
Good to see you, Amy, and excited to be here.
It's great. So as always, I'm going to read what CliftonStrengths officially shares a little bit about harmony, and then I'm going to describe a little in my own mind what I think harmony is, and then I'll reach out to you, Augusta. So according to CliftonStrengths, people strong in the harmony theme look for consensus. They don't enjoy conflict. Rather, they seek areas of agreement. If I had to define harmony in my own words, it was weird because the word that comes up for me is overlap. It is about a person who helps to find sort of commonality, especially maybe at a point where it seems like maybe there is nothing common, a thought, an idea, a belief, but this person creates overlap for others. And so that was the word that kind of came for me. When I think about overlap, I think about how in construction and in our bodies, in so many ways, that metaphor of when we put something sort of on top of it, the strongest point is really right where my fingers are, right? Where it's like a double overlay versus what's happening over here. And so that overlap, I think, creates stability and a platform so that then the two different opinions or people or thoughts or whatever can kind of come together a little bit more, but they have a stable ground to kind of come from. So that's my Amy Magyar version of harmony. How would you describe Clifton harmony for people?
I love what you just said. That was a great, I'm very visual, so I really could see that overlap. And you know, that's exactly when I think of harmony. For me, it's the ability to work within a space, say within a team or within two people, and if there's conflict or you know, non-consensus, but to work within that space to bring it together and find that consensus and find that agreement. And so that visual of that overlap and that stability between the two, where the strength is that agreement. And so that's exactly how I would describe it. It's almost like somebody with a strength of harmony in their top 5 doesn't look at the emotion of each individual that's within a group or between two people, but it's really working within that space. So I think you started it off beautifully with that visual.
So it's interesting because as a connector, as someone with connectedness, CliftonStrengths connectedness is about seeing the connection between things. But we don't create overlap, right? So it's sort of like we still want to bring together, but we do it where it's to sort of introduce and allow whatever's going to happen, versus harmony, where it's almost like the focus is to create that foundation so that we can do something with it. And so for me, it's about bringing two sides of a gap together, but not being so involved in what happens when they come together. And I think harmony is, there's an investment there of making sure that there is sort of space where people can feel supported and heard, and you know, or two ideas have the same amount of space to be heard. I think we're in a really divisive time right now, and I think often I actually practiced harmony the other day in watching a news channel I don't normally watch. And what I was trying to do was trying to understand where people were coming from, sort of from that viewpoint, politically, ethically, you know, whatever it is, sort of understand where they're coming from, so that I personally can try to find some common ground. It is not
Yeah.
something that comes supernatural to me or is one of my strengths to do. But it really made me think about those with harmony who that is just such a natural place for them to be, and how it
Right.
is, there's that they're scanning for that. They're scanning
Right.
for that. How can I create that? So I just,
Yeah.
yeah, I used my
Yeah.
own experiment with myself and found it was quite uncomfortable, but important work. So
Yeah, well, I like how you spoke about the difference between connection, having the strength of connection, because when I think of harmony, also it's finding that commonality, that space to find agreement, but in order to move forward.
yes.
And so it's almost like it's if there's a stuck situation, which we think of people with high harmony on teams, and what great team members they are, because conflict usually means stuck. There's no movement, because the
Right.
views of others are becoming more important than the forward motion or towards a
Yeah.
goal or towards whatever it is they might be working towards. So I see that the strength of harmony in being able to work with others, like you said, almost to understand and get clarity where the other may be coming from, but also to find the agreement and move forward. It's very much a movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think sometimes harmony, it being the relationship building theme, one of the relationship building themes is that it is so much about a place where people, like I said, can feel heard. In what I love about true harmony is that that person who has harmony isn't taking a side. They're actually
Mm.
staying really neutral because the goal isn't to pick a side. The goal is to help the two, sort of, if it's a triangle, you're sort of staying on the top and allowing the other two to connect and find the similarities and find that common ground. That's where the fuel is, not in a sense, and even uh, siding with one or the other. And I think that
Right.
that's really fascinating. If I use the term diplomacy, I could see that being how a strength is utilized out in the
Mm.
world, sort of the diplomacy. But sometimes I think diplomacy is interesting because our diplomats, for example, our foreign diplomats who work for the US, they actually do have an agenda, and their agenda is to get our point across, right, to other
Mm.
countries. And I truly think with people with harmony is that they try to stay in the middle
Yeah.
so that they're not swayed either way to help bring the two parties together.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. It does. And I think for, when we talk about any of these strengths, um, when we have, whatever our constellation of top five are, they're a value, they're values that we actually come from. And so someone with harmony, it's like you said, it's not that they're trying to find a viewpoint or agree or disagree. It's the value of finding that harmony and dissipating conflict and finding consensus.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple of nuances that I want to share that maybe are a little bit different than some of the other Clifton strengths that we've done before. I'm going to read a little bit, and I'd love to just get your sense of if you've seen that before, because harmony isn't sort of cut and dry of this is the only way you show up, just like most of the strengths, right? But it's interesting because I think when I share with people what harmony is about, they think, sort of their immediate reaction could be, oh my gosh, these are people that actually don't like conflict. They don't want to be a part of, the best way to have harmony is to not have people be in conflict. And
Yeah.
so I just want to share a little bit and get some feedback from you. Um, the idea of harmony is that harmony responds to the presence of conflict in many different ways. And these are ways some people may, of these three, they may lean towards one more than the other three, or excuse me, than the other two, but they tend to, all three of these tend to show up in some way. And so the different kinds of types of harmony that have been identified as sort of a run and hide harmony. When
Mm.
conflict arises, this person will remove themselves from conflict until it's gone, because they have such a strong need to not be around conflict. When it does arise, they simply disappear. And again, I'll come back to, it's not that people with harmony love conflict. They don't
Right.
love it, but it's
Seek it.
just when
Yeah.
it's asked of them, they're able to show up in a way to help bring people together. That doesn't mean that they go out and search it.
Right.
Where have you noticed that, whether it's with clients or in some stories that you've heard about people with harmony? Where has that shown up for people?
Yeah, and you know, and I agree with that, because a lot of times, you know, just the word harmony itself kind of brings a connotation of you know, somebody who might, you know, really kind of walk in and be like kind of kumbaya-ish, or let's all, you know, get together and let's not have conflict. Where I really find that the strength is, you know, there's much more to this strength actually about how they work within the space of conflict. And like you said, they don't, it's not that they're either seeking it or they're running from it. It's just how they work with differences and
Yeah.
different viewpoints. Yeah. And
And
so,
so
I mean,
that,
even people can hear that when I, you know, do their strengths and harmony shows up, there's some different reactions to it. I'm sure you've gotten that also. And so it's really, you know, a beautiful thing to be able to speak to, actually, wait a minute, this is a strength and this is how
right.
it's a strength. Yeah.
It's funny, right? With harmony and empathy, when
Yeah.
people have one of those two strengths and it comes up as their top five, almost like the reaction is, I'm embarrassed I have that.
Yeah,
And yet
absolutely.
it's such a truly powerful, you know, both.
Absolutely.
I mean, you were mentioning you have a client with both of those. So talk about
Yeah.
hyper awareness of
Yeah. Ah,
emotions,
it's
right?
almost like, yeah, totally, you
So
know.
the second way that harmony shows up is exactly what you just described, sort of the stand in the middle harmony. They step into the circle of conflict and urge people to get along. They themselves may not have the answer or solution to the conflict, but they find themselves right in the midst of trying to mediate peace through the removal of the conflict. So that's sort of what we've been describing a lot of, is sort of standing in the middle. What I
Yeah.
love about that definition is they don't get excited because they have the answer. They get excited by helping people find the answer for themselves between those two,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to mention, you know, when you were saying that, is it's not about you know, finding either or. It's really, how can I help these two people understand themselves and each other's point of view to find that consensus. So
Right.
there's a detachment to the
Yeah,
outcome, which makes it
that's a
a beautiful way to work with it.
that's a great way of maybe sharing a little bit about the difference between empathy and harmony. Is that
Hmm.
you often people will use empathy to help understand what's happening for the two different groups, two different parties, two different people, but they don't, if they don't have empathy and it's just harmony that's really, on fire, is that they don't get sort of trapped in the emotion between the two,
Absolutely.
right? I don't know if that makes any
Absolutely.
sense whatsoever.
Totally.
It's early,
Yeah.
so the brain is still processing, but
No,
yeah.
but that's absolutely right, because empathy is being able to, that ability to sense and feel and really kind of live in the emotion that somebody else is having. And so that's where when I think of somebody who has both, it's like, wow, how do you hold that, your feeling and sensing emotion, if it's, say, it's between two people, and also have the ability to stay in the middle and work with that. That's just fascinating to me.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
almost like too much.
Now, speaking of too much, it brings me to the third, which is sometimes people with harmony will stir up conflict in not create conflict, but bring it to the table and say, we're
Mm,
split here, right? And
mm,
um, they're not creating conflict, but they're shining a light on it, and not to
yeah,
say good luck with that, but more to say, hey, this exists and this is what's keeping us from being able to move forward, to your point of being stuck. How do we
exactly.
move forward with this? And so often
Yeah,
they're truth tellers, right, of sort of what's really happening.
right. And that's, again, my visual of that is two people sitting at a table looking away, stuck in their own views and, points of view, and being very, possibly very righteous about it, and having somebody with harmony kind of facilitate the turnaround and the look at each other, and the understanding to be able to maybe see a potential of a consensus.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrote this and then you just nailed it. The summation of what you just said was people with harmony teach us to open our minds, quiet our egos, and use our voices for action.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of the, it's not just, hey, there's a conflict. It's, hey, there's a conflict. Now what? How do we move forward? Right. So if you have somebody on your team or your partner or a sister, or mother, or brother, know that harmony can show up in a number of different ways, but it's often about bringing what's really happening. They're truth tellers and speakers in a sense as well. And so sometimes in this world, we don't want the truth and we don't want to really see what's been happening. And so I think our reaction to someone with harmony may be is to put a wall up and sort of say, that's not really happening. And, but they're not telling us to sort of shame us. It's, there's a way through this. There's a way around this. There's a way, by this, whatever it is. So there's a beauty in that. And that's somebody,
Absolutely.
if you have somebody with harmony on your team, if you're an employer, wow, please don't shove them into a desk and have them look at just data, have them be a part of, when there's a big decision to be made, they're going to make sure that both sides are heard, which is so beautiful.
And can hear each other.
Yeah. Oh.
And that's the beauty. And I get so excited when I have a client who has harmony and might have had that reaction of, they've got this immediate kind of what they think about harmony, but just to be able to say, what the beauty and the strength of not just working with conflict or working on a team, but to help each other see themselves, but to see each other. And that's an incredible strength.
What's funny is it's very much it's a coaching strength too, in the sense of some coaching language around it could be, whether it's for someone using it in coaching or someone using it as a leader, is what might be happening for the other person, or where might that person be coming from, or what's their perspective. So it's always, but that's not the first thing that's said. It's usually, it's allowing, like you've said so beautifully, allowing the person to feel heard.
Yeah.
And then saying, wonderful, let's listen to what might be happening for the other person. And so it's a really great way to expand, because I'm just picturing myself as a 5-year-old, looking very similar to what I look like right now with probably my hair and little ponytails, is sort of that feeling of like, I don't want to know what's happening to that other person. She stole my toy. I don't care what's happening for her. But yet the beauty of, I believe I never had my chance to offer strengths to my mom, CliftonStrengths. She passed too early, but my gut says she has harmony, because I can hear her voice in me, sort of saying, what was it about that person who took the toy that you think maybe, where were they coming from, or what was happening for them, and kind of helping me see the other side and doing it in a way that truly helped me see deeper into people and not just the surface level of that. But that's not always what we want. So it can be sort of in our own selves conflict creating, because we tell ourselves a story. We couldn't possibly want to hear a different kind of story, right?
That's very true.
I'm going to look through my notes here for a second. What else do you think is important for people to know about CliftonStrengths harmony, as both the highs and lows of it, or things to be aware of?
Well, I would ask, if we're talking to somebody who's coming to us for maybe some career, clarity, and you're working with, they've got a top 5 strength of harmony, what would you say to them would be some kind of situations that they might want to avoid? You mentioned something about don't accept something maybe where you're sitting at a desk working with data. What else would you possibly say, what to avoid and what to move towards?
If you find yourself, you're in an organization where the focus is on the disagreement and not on the solution, that can be really exhausting, because 1 + 1 = 2, if for someone with harmony, if that is if people just keep beating up that's the way it is, it may be the truth that 1 + 1 = 2. At least I think that's still, the case. Who knows? COVID changed everything, but I still think 1 + 1 = 2. But if an organization is so focused on either trying to dispel that or beat that idea up and not say, okay, so if 1 + 1 = 2, how do we get to 3? Like if they don't go to trying to find solutions and they stay more in the issue, I think that's really hard for somebody with harmony to work in. I think it's an opportunity for them to show up and help try to move towards a solution and common ground.
Yeah.
But I think if an organization is really stuck in a victim mode, it can be really tough for that person with harmony. They'll try, but only so many times can you hit hit your head against a wall, right? Before it's time to sort of, back away from that. I think one of the things, if you have an organization that is quite collaborative among departments, that is really powerful. But if you hear a lot of, we don't do that, or that's not in our job description, that can be really off-putting to somebody with harmony, because they're kind of like, isn't the idea to try to figure out how we do this together versus sort of separate? So I think that's just, even as they're interviewing and listening to the language around collaboration and asking those questions of how do the departments collaborate? Is there open collaboration? There's even, in some organizations, there's even work share where someone in one department will actually work in another department physically. This is before, when we actually could sit in our offices, but they would sit in the office with the other department to just hear what's happening. That's, those are the kind of organizations that someone with harmony probably is really going to excel at.
I agree.
It feels really good for them.
I agree. Yeah. Siloed would not work. And that's,
Now, here's where it can be frustrating for somebody, especially if that person the harmony person is maybe a leader, is they'll make space for the different opinions. And it may be frustrating for people where, because they want to make space for all the opinions or most of the opinions, there may be some opinions that seem actually pretty ridiculous. And yet the leader seems to be really open to that. And I think, it may lead the people who are watching this happen be like, no, that's the dumbest thing that could ever have happened. Don't listen to that. But give the person, that leader with harmony, give them some faith that they are going to see that maybe it is an absolutely ridiculous idea, but at the time they're not going to say that, because the goal is to have the person feel heard. And there actually may be a little nugget of truth somewhere in that crazy suggestion that was made. But they're not so apt to shut something down. And I think that can be unnerving for people who process quickly, or who get into this mode of, well, Bob always has that stupid idea about blah, blah, blah. It's like, harmony leader may not follow what Bob has to say, but she is going to make space for Bob to be able to share it again, because it's important for Bob or Sherry, right? So, or Barry to share it. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's sort of that idea of,
no, that's really,
be patient with somebody with harmony, because they really are doing almost like the scanning and this research for the good of the organization, or for the good of the conflict, right?
Yeah. And going back to that individual, it's so important to build that trust and that ease in being able to share, no matter what it is, and having other teammates or, people in the department be able to hear it.
Yes.
Whether or not it's agreed upon, or without that, kind of reactive viewpoint of, this is ridiculous, or yes, no. It's just building that sense of, we're all here to be heard, and together to find consensus to move forward.
So to that point, I think for people that perhaps have harmony, and it is about they're finding themselves staying far away from conflict because it feels yucky, because they may not see how it's going to resolve itself is to
Mhm.
not get caught up in that idea of the word conflict,
Mhm.
but instead sort of look at it as it doesn't have to be bad. Conflict doesn't mean that it's bad, that two have opposing views. In fact, if I use the term collaboration, if the idea is to help find a sort of collaborative in between, is instead of you don't want to deal with conflict, it's instead you want to work in collaboration. The way to collaborate, right, is to bring people together. So if you find as harmony that you're staying away from conflict, I understand that, but it could be a life hack where it's about changing the language. Instead of conflict, is there another way to use the language? Instead of avoiding
Yeah.
conflict, you're leaning in towards collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So just ways to sort of look at the perspective of what's happening. Because to be honest with you, for someone that's maybe with harmony that's avoiding conflict, they're actually the person that's supposed to be stepping in because they,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the
you know,
opportunity.
their emotion, they don't get emotional in the conflict, but right before it, maybe that's where they feel, because they feel something's out of sorts, and that's where they're feeling the unrest. When they get into the conflict, oftentimes the unrest goes away because they're in that action mode.
Yeah.
That, I think we've seen that with people that have maybe wanted to stay on the outside, and it actually feels worse to stay on the
Yeah.
outside. So
Yeah.
they think it's the conflict that's making them feel on the outside. It's not. It's the fact that there is something and they're not doing anything about it that actually makes them.
Right. They're not stepping into their strength, which is natural. And yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said.
Yeah.
That's that's very true.
Any other parting comments that we want to do as we wrap up our time with harmony? Anything that you want the world to know about someone with harmony, or remind them about?
I just think it is a beautiful talent, a beautiful strength. And, you know, when we get more than two people together, it's again, you know, how we define conflict, I don't know, but there's likely to be differing of opinions. This human nature. And so those that have harmony and have that natural ability to really work within that space and bring people together, you know, find consensus. It's an exciting strength,
Mhm.
and so I have high appreciation
I love it.
for
I
it.
love it. I do see it when, if harmony or someone in your life has harmony and it's one of their top five strengths, um, you will naturally feel very peaceful around that person because that is their MO is often to help find that peace.
Mm-hmm.
And um, there's a heightened sensitivity to tension and friction, but it doesn't mean stay away from it. It just means that is they feel much more comfortable when that tension and that friction comes to a place where there's more similarities than not. And so embracing it and just being able to tell yourself, this isn't forever. What I'm feeling the fact that two people don't agree or two ideas are in conflict with each other, but it's not the fact that
Oh,
that you need to run away from it. Instead, it's more,
right.
this is why you don't feel good. It's because you know that there's a commonality to get there, and you are probably the one to help them get there. So don't get wrapped up in that emotion, for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Augusta, thank you so much for working through harmony with me and
Ah,
making me feel peaceful and just even talking about it, right? I think what we see in this world is that we probably need more we need to be reminded more of our similarities and overlap than our differences right now.
absolutely. Always. Yeah.
So to those with harmony, get out in the world and do not be afraid to share the fact that we do have more similarities than differences, for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you next time. Remember, people, this conversation that we have every time between myself and Augusta is not, it's not the end all be all. It's an opportunity for you to understand harmony a little bit more and to know that there's so many different ways that it can show up in you.
Mhm.
There's my individualization showing up. But
Mhm.
work with a coach, work with a peer, someone who has harmony, somebody who has the antithesis of harmony, so that you can get a better understanding of how it shows up for you. So you learn how to dial it up or dial it down depending on sort of the situation that you're in. So just remember that. With that being said, thank you so much, Augusta, and we'll see you
Oh,
on the
thank you,
other
Amy.
side.
Absolutely.
All righty. Cheers.